So good day and welcome to this session on Microsoft Collaboration Suite Business Benefits. We are Andy Ginn and Rob Homburg. I'm a solution architect in HPE's Pointnext consulting organization. And in today's session, we would like to spend the next 30 minutes or so to explore potential business benefits that customers can realize when adopting the Microsoft Collaboration Suite. In this Collaboration Suite, we see three major potential areas where these potential benefits can be achieved. They're advanced collaboration, data governance, and business transformation. And we will address all three of them as we go through this session. But before we start diving into these subject matters, what exactly is the Microsoft Collaboration Suite? Now, Microsoft's collaboration platform integrates several core software systems like SharePoint, Office 365 applications, Yammer, but also Microsoft Teams and Exchange. And together, all these Microsoft 365 tools are ideal for managing multiple employees on and offline around the world. So altogether, these workloads form, in our view, the Microsoft 365 Collaboration Suite. Now, Microsoft 365 unlocks the modern ways of working. So no matter if you're working from home or if there is an emergency while you're away, you can have the peace of mind that you've got the tools to help you adapt from wherever you are. So whether you're using a laptop or your mobile device, you can easily attend meetings online, share Office files, co-author these documents in real time, and be productive from anywhere. And I would say that that is a major benefit and one that we have seen materialize with lots of our customers during the past pandemic year. Now, Microsoft 365 supports collaboration from an individual standpoint. So if you want others to be able to edit with you, you can easily share files and collaborate with trusted peers for a fresh perspective. Or when you work together in this way, only those select people can access and edit these shared files. And we will come back on that subject later when we talk about data governance. Now, later on, if that document it feels like it's ready, you are able to share that with your team. And collaboration in a team means that you want to have as little friction in your productivity and in your activities as possible. So you want to be able to seamlessly build ideas and organize files, attend meetings, and collaborate with others inside and outside of your team. Now, with Microsoft Teams, everyone can work together as one, and it doesn't matter if someone is working remotely or in a different time zone. You'll get all the work done. So, in our view, within HPE's view, Microsoft Teams is at the core of the collaboration suite.
So as you say, Rob, Teams has got a lot of functionality. What do you see Teams mostly being used for at the moment, do you think?
So what Teams is mostly used in our view, and also with our customers for presence, chat, meetings, and calls. So what we see is that the Teams client is installed on a Windows client or on a mobile Android or iOS device. And internal communications and collaborations amongst team members within the enterprise is actually what Teams is designed for. But what we also see many organizations that have already enabled guest access to the Teams workload, so they can enable federation with customers or with suppliers in the value chain, and that is what I would call this chat, presence, meetings, and calls, and federation is what I would call the basic use case for Teams. And in order to run this use case, HPE Pointnext have already created a fast start service, so we can have customers up and running within the period of 2 weeks with a number of sites and a number of users provisioned. And that is something that is a real business benefit. So instead of waiting for, let's say, months and months and months to get Teams up and running, with our help, you would be able to do that within 10 days of duration.
So that's really interesting. But what other functionality actually is available in Teams?
So on top of this, let's say, base use case that we have with the Fast Start service, we see a group of customers that are more looking into document collaboration within Teams. Now that makes sense because Teams is built on the SharePoint framework, on top of SharePoint functionality. So the other pillar under Teams, I would say, are the groups, right? And in my opinion, groups is the most underestimated component in the Microsoft 365 public cloud offering. With groups, you tie all these workloads together. Groups is a multi-application membership layer. It could be a distribution list in Exchange. It could be a Teams group in Teams. It could be an editor group in SharePoint. So groups, in my opinion, is a vital point in order to establish this whole myriad of capabilities that Teams can offer.
Okay. And what about telephony and audio video conferencing? I mean, how do you establish those in Teams?
Well, yeah, that's an essential question for us as consultants, and also an essential question for our customers. And the answer on that, as a true consultant would say, it depends on the functionality that the customer is looking to achieve, right? So if this is about voice architecture, the customer will have multiple flavors of providing voice and audio conferencing features. Now, with these several architectural choices, the customer has to look at its current legacy estate in telephony and audio video conferencing solutions. So whatever they have running at this moment in time decides or gives direction to the architectural choice that they have to make when it comes to voice and audio conferencing. And it's also dependent upon the potential voice applications that the customer is running, right? Not everything that uses a phone will look like a phone, as we say. Think of your switchboards, your receptionists, and your call or contact center applications. They put a heavy load on what voice architecture you're going to introduce in your own organization. Now, some customers opt for using the Microsoft phone system as the PBX from the cloud, and also use the PSTN interconnects that Microsoft is offering. They term them calling plans. So your entire voice solution is then in the cloud and in the hands of Microsoft, and that is a big benefit for a lot of customers, because you don't need any more on-premises components. You don't need that old legacy PBX lying around with your expensive support agreements in order to keep that running. Other mostly larger organizations, and that has to do with the fact that phone system and calling plans are only available in a limited number of countries, only a handful. So larger organizations that have sites and user presence in countries that are not being serviced with calling plans need to work out a way to connect their on-premises components with the Microsoft phone system. And for that, we have a second architectural choice in enterprise, in the Teams voice area, which is called direct routing. And direct routing is the architecture where the phone system in the cloud will connect to on-premises components, like, for instance, voice gateways, session border controllers, or survivable branch appliances for those sites that need local breakouts to SIP trunk providers that the customer already has. So it all depends on your current situation, as I said. Now with audio and video conferencing, the situation is relatively easier to explain. Customers opt for a Microsoft Teams meeting room solution with a meeting room console, some displays, audio and video equipment, and they are installed in physical meeting rooms. And these meeting rooms can now participate in any Teams meeting as a resource. So everybody that is in the meeting room physically will then be able to meet with other people that offline and remotely can connect to those to the same meeting. Now, for this conferencing functionality to be enrolled and rolled out and implemented into a customer organization, within HPE, we have created a OPEX solution, a meeting room as a service. So people are able to get the assessment, the delivery, but also the post-implementation services, as well as the hardware components for a meeting room solution delivered to the customer by HPE with a service contract of potentially 36 months. And at the end of that service month, of that 36-month service offering, HPE would take back the meeting room components, and you can renew your hardware on premises. I think that is a pretty neat solution, especially for people that have a challenge in combining these offline / remote users and bringing them all together and giving them a meeting room functionality that is on par no matter where you are. And next to that, as we said, with federated guest access in the basic use case example, we can also offer federation of video solutions using cloud video interop with companies like Pexip to make sure that your meeting rooms can also be used when you're meeting external customers or external partners and external providers.
Well, that's true. That's one element of Teams, and obviously there are a number of services under the covers, as we've talked about, SharePoint, OneDrive, Exchange, etc. What about document collaboration in Teams and the experience for users around that?
Right, as I mentioned earlier, Andy, Teams is built on top of that SharePoint framework, right? So we actually need to ask the question how document collaboration is established in the SharePoint framework, and I think this falls more into your area of expertise, but it falls into a number of categories, right? So and top of mind for me with document collaboration is data governance and information protection. So I would like to ask you the question is how is information protection or data protection arranged in SharePoint, but also in OneDrive, because OneDrive is also built on top of that SharePoint framework.
Sure, I mean it's as you said, SharePoint has always had information protection at its heart. It's been there since the really early days of the product, going all the way back really to SharePoint 2003. And it's still in SharePoint Server as well. But the idea is that we authenticate, so we know who you are. Once we know who you are, we then provide authorization. So you're only allowed to see the items that you are authorized to see. If you do a search and you don't have access to an item, you won't even see it in the search results. So that's great within the context and within the confines of the 365 environment. That authorization and authentication is exposed through Teams as well. The challenge, if you like, is when those items are emailed out or shared out outside of the organization. They leave the boundary of Microsoft. They still need to be protected, and basically that SharePoint and OneDrive protection needs to go outside beyond 365. It's a challenge up till now. Sorry, go on.
So I was about to say, so what can an organization do about that wider challenge then?
Well, so what Microsoft has done is that they have taken that initial model of authentication and authorization, and they've built it out into M365 in general. So it's gone beyond SharePoint and OneDrive. Microsoft is spending a lot of money in research and development around, for example, artificial intelligence. There's a program inside their organization called Cortex, which is working hard on making life easier for administrators and for information owners and information security. And one of the things that they've done is within 365 itself, they've embedded this idea of trainable classifiers. So you can feed in the way that a set of documents look and feel, and the trainable classifiers will actually understand over a period of time what a document looks like, and therefore will allow the auto labeling and auto application of 365 controls into those documents without the users having to worry about it. The vast majority of the documents will be caught that way, which will make life a lot easier. The other great thing about Cortex is that it's building a network in the background to understand all the information within 365, whether that's documents, whether it's intranet pages, whether it's people profiles. And as, for example, if you receive an email which says, we're going to be talking about project XYZ, in the background, Cortex will recognize the fact XYZ has a whole set of materials associated with it and will provide you intelligently links through to the materials that you may need, but only if you have authorization to see them. So it's that mixture of making life easier for people whilst also protecting the information is incredibly important. 365 has already also provided a whole set of controls through the introduction of information classification through typing profiles, labels, sharing controls, data loss prevention, which allows the expansion of that foundational control outside of the organization. So you may see, for example, that you can share information with certain people and not with others. You may find automated watermarks being put into documents, encryption of documents, or even documents timing out over a period of time. So as an external user, you'll receive a document, you can look at it, but then after 7 days, for example, it will say, this document is no longer accessible, please go back to the author for a new copy. So it extends that control beyond the boundary. They've also recognise that obviously 365 is not the only game in town. There are lots of extensions to Teams where you can put third-party apps into the Teams interface. You can also access things such as Box and Dropbox and Google Drive and others. So what Microsoft has done is they built a follow the information controls, as I said, such as encryption and aging, so that as you start using those external providers, the control that's built within 365 follows the information, and it just means that you as the author and the information owner are confident that that's not leaking out. And also, Microsoft is aware that hybrid is important. There are still large number of organizations using Exchange on-prem, SharePoint on-prem, SharePoint Server, etc. So using Azure Information Protection extensions, the classification and control that you apply within 365 can be extended out into file shares and SharePoint Server, going all the way back to SharePoint 2010, so that the user gets the same experience and the information receives the same control as it would do as if it's in SharePoint Online, for example.
What you're saying, Andy, is that we have the major building blocks, the major components to make sure that data governance is pretty well defined. But what does it mean for an organization in terms of the way a business operates?
What you need to think about is the transformation of an organization. It's about people, process, and technology. And obviously 365 or SharePoint Server or Dropbox or etc. is the technology element of that. But you have to think about the people and the process as well. So, and actually the implementation of the technology is probably the final step in a journey. You need to think about, for example, information architecture. So an information architecture specifies the classification structure for information. What can be done with it, by whom, where, and when. It also specifies the aging out of a piece of information and what happens at the end of its life cycle. Do you archive it? Do you destroy it? What do you do with it? So that information architecture, most organizations have an information architecture of some sort, but that needs to be reviewed against the modern way that an organization may work and the opportunity to refresh it and to keep it refreshed. So the process of regularly reviewing that going forward is important. Alongside the information architecture, you also need information policies and processes and roles which will manage and monitor and enforce those rules. So if you set a rule up which says that a particular piece of information is not allowed to leave the organization, how do you manage it? How do you monitor it? And what do you do if people are trying to break those rules? So there's a whole set of new ways of working that an organization needs to think about because of the opportunity that this technology transformation is presenting now. It's a big task, and it can seem to be daunting to go from legacy file shares and sort of Wild West approach to something which is actually under control and is continuing to be under control going forward. So to use an analogy, how on earth would you eat an elephant? And the answer is one bite at a time. So don't try to get to the end point straight away. But what you're trying to do is to break those tasks down, map the implementation into schedules. Who's going to go first? What are you going to implement first? How do you bring in HR, legal, financial, whoever else it is that needs to be part of this transformation, because it's not just about technology, it's about the business in general. So how do you align the schedule of transformation into the business structure and events? How do you design, test, and implement and manage the control over time? That's the task that a program like this would undertake. So if you go down that road and you implement these controls, what you will get, what comes out of it, the benefits are greater regulatory compliance. You know that your sensitive information is protected, and from indiscriminate sharing, it's only kept for as long as it's needed, and it's destroyed in the way that's actually auditable. Another benefit is the increased productivity for users. I don't know about you guys, but before we had these sorts of tools, I would know I've got this information somewhere. I have a document somewhere that I want to reuse, and I'll fiddle about in my file shares trying to find it. I might take a few hours to try and find this document, and in the end go, do you know, I just can't be bothered, and I'll write it again. Yeah. By doing efficient search and efficient discovery, Microsoft has spent a lot of money on search, for example, and discovery and classification. You can quickly find the information, you can quickly reuse it, and you get on with it with your day job rather than just trying to do that search. And also another one is technology retirement. We find that a lot of clients have platforms that they've used for a long time. They're paying for maintenance on it. They're paying for licenses. And actually, you may find within the 365 environment, there are tools which you've already got because you've paid for the licenses, which do the same job as the things that you have on-prem. And you can actually migrate your workloads to those tools, retire the technology that you don't need anymore, and save that money for investment somewhere else. All of that, again, sounds like a big job, but what's nice is that Pointnext has a rich set of services that we can bring on board to assist with organizations in the definition and implementation of both their information architecture and their life cycle, as well as the governance processes that I've talked about, how to build those governance processes out, how to define the roles, and to introduce and manage and control these. Got to remember, it's not a one-off event. So this is part of the definition of these policies and processes and roles must be part of the governance cadence. So an organization will go back on a regular basis to say, is the information architecture still correct? Do our information lifecycle rules still match compliance and governance? And are the tools that Microsoft are bringing on, because Microsoft 365 itself is an evergreen environment. It's constantly having new technology and new functionality brought on board. Do the technologies that we're using still match with what we can actually use within this cloud platform? So there's a whole sorts of things that organizations need to think about. But sometimes they do struggle. They don't know where to start. It's a big picture, and there's all kinds of different places that you could start. So what we've done is we've developed a set of quick, no more than a day or two, set of workshops to address these pain points, the quick wins and the roadmaps. Having a small set of experts like us in a room with their decision makers, organizations can really focus in on a short period of time on the technology, the business, and the processes to draw out the outcomes that an organization can have and the path on how to get there, which will be short, medium, and long term.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense, Andy. But I think that is more about. Let me switch the slide here, because that is more about how we would automate
Yes.
and extend the functionality of the day-to-day business, right? So.
Yeah. So what do you see as the other benefits? I mean, looking at that business transformation and thinking about what I've just been talking about, what do you see are the other benefits for organizations in the foreseeable future?
That's a good question, because as you rightfully said, what we have been discussing so far is automating processes as they stand today, right? We're not actually going through a disruption of making sure that the organization, the business, is digitally transformed. So I see some benefits in the foreseeable future around business transformation. We could be focusing on, for instance, process automation, and if we then reach back to your analogy of people, processes, and technology, as you earlier mentioned, technology for me would then be the use of something completely new that is brought to us by Microsoft, which is the Power Platform, Power Apps, Power Automate, Power BI, Power Virtual Agents. So that is the technology in my understanding. People, the people analogy here is citizen coders versus professional developers. That's another business transformation, another disruptive activity. And the process point here is I would call it robotic process automation or simple business process automation. And then, as you rightfully mentioned, using Azure AI, machine learning, voice functionality out of Cortana, connectors, bots, and virtual agents from the Azure ecosystem. And I'm mentioning quite a lot here from a technology point of view. So Power BI for our listeners is a tool that makes it possible for everyone to make informed and confident business decisions by putting data-driven insights into everyone's hands. And that is something that you don't need to be a data analyst to do data analysis inside an organization. Secondly, I mentioned Power Apps, the tool to turn ideas into organizational solutions by enabling everyone, yet again, everyone, not only professional developers, but everyone in the organization to build custom apps that solve business challenges. And then Power Automate, I mentioned the tool that can boost business productivity to get more done by giving everyone the ability to automate organizational processes. And then lastly, Power Virtual Agent, so easily build chatbots to engage conversationally with end users, customers alike, without any coding required. I mean, that's a major game changer in a lot of organizations.
And some people would see that almost as science fiction. The idea that you've got this bot in the background that you're just chatting with, and it's not a human being, but it's absolutely here today. The items that you've just been talking about, Rob, are a really great example of Microsoft's research and development, the evergreening not only of Microsoft 365, but other of their platforms as well, and the integration of them. It would be fantastic to continue talking about this for hours, and I'm sure that we could, but I can see that our time is actually up. So unfortunately, we have to say goodbye now.
Indeed it is, Andy, indeed it is. So as a conclusion, with the introduction of Microsoft 365 in any customer organization, I hope you have been able to understand that you can achieve several business benefits. So I hope that both you and I have been able to articulate those potential business benefits, so that you as a customer can unlock. If you have any questions as a result of this session, please do not hesitate to reach out either to Andy or myself through email or phone. And from both Andy and myself, thanks for joining this session, and we wish you both a great day. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.